What you are listening to is real. The participants are not actors. They are actual litigants with a case pending in the squared circle. Both parties have agreed to dismiss their cases and have their disputes settled here in our forum, the Turnbuckle Debate.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Turnbuckle Debate. My name is Sneed.
I'm Chad.
I'm Tom, the OG Fake Kid, the staple of the Turnbuckle Debate.
And our guest joining us today, the host of the Captain's Log on the Major Pod Network, also half of the FWF Tag Team Champions with Brian Myers, and the host of the Car Jomez podcast.
That's right.
Shoes, what's up, man?
What's happening, guys? How you doing?
Doing well. Some nice hardware you got on your shoulder there.
I keep it close to me everywhere I go. It's always got to be within arm's reach.
Pretty and shiny. I like it.
Yeah, I do put the little Windex on it a couple times a week. So
shine it up real nice.
Yeah, stick it straight up my candy ass.
Man, it's awesome to have you on. Tell everybody a little bit about what you have going on, man.
Oh, man, I feel like I got my fingers in a lot of things, all different levels of varying success, but doing two podcasts now, one on the Major Pod Network. I've had my own podcast, the Car Jomez podcast, which is a general pop culture sit down and chat. That's weekly every Thursday. I've been doing that about 6 years. FWF Tag Team Champions by some miracle of God. I've got a YouTube channel, youtube.com/JoeShoes, where I try out bad foods that really you shouldn't be trying, so I'll do it for you, and I'll let you know if it's worth it. My body apparently is impervious to cholesterol at this point, so I'm just out there trying to provide a service. So it's just and I'm a baseball blogger too during baseball season. So I'm actually a member of the Internet Baseball Writers Association of America.
Oh,
nice.
Wow. Man.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm a huge baseball fan. So that's
cool. It's one of those things that once I realized I wasn't good enough to keep playing it, I decided I wanted to be a Mets beat writer at one point. And then I got into wrestling, and that one dream went to the side as I chased another one and just never got out of it. So I started blogging and then just kept it up for a number of years. I probably don't do it as much as I wish I could or as much as I should at this point, but it's always there, and I always come back to it at some point.
Oh, that's
awesome, man.
So quick question then. When you won the tag team titles, the FWF tag team titles, when was the last time you wrestled before that? And did you ever imagine you would be wrestling again?
Oh, did I ever imagine I'd be wrestling again is probably the easiest one. The answer is very no. My last like real match was probably about 6 years ago before. I got to the point where I was doing other stuff. I moved on, and they say the business always pulls you back in, and to an extent that's true. I still have my friends in the business, and I was still doing things around the periphery of wrestling, but I was okay with not wrestling anymore. I'm older. I'm in my 40s now. My body hurts. I've never been a body guy at all. I've been in wrestling shape, but I've never looked the part, which is what hurt me early on in my career, especially. I just had a bad body. I've always had a bad body. And even when I was younger, I was a collegiate. I was a Division I soccer player in college. I was a scholarship athlete. At one point, I was an alternate for the U.S. national team when I was 16. So I was the under 17 division. But I was always athletic, but I never looked the part. So it was always one of those things when people looked at me, they'd be like, "Oh, him? Really?" Like if you've ever watched Arrested Development with George Michael's girlfriend Anne, that was I was basically Anne. Her. But no, and this came out. Even with FWF and the stuff that I'd been doing with the Major Pod guys, was never something that was even on my radar. Like, I figure I'll come out and help out if they want me to do anything. That's fine. It's an excuse for me to get together with my buddies, but never thought I would be wrestling, let alone winning the tag team belts. And even when the idea got thrown my way, I said I would do it because they were kind of in a lurch at the moment. A lot of the plans that had existed had gone wrong. But even when it got pitched to me, I was like, yeah, I'll do it, knowing full well it wouldn't happen, or someone would veto it and go on to a new idea. And they didn't. So kind of booked myself into a corner with that one.
That's awesome, man. Well, it does sound like you have your hands in a lot of different things, but that's awesome.
I like to try everything.
Yeah.
I've always had a lot of interest. I've always had varying interest all over the spectrum. And now, especially with the outlets and tools that we have available to us, like, why not try?
Yeah.
If I failed at a lot of things, so okay, I just try something else. At least, I used to say when I'm 50 and I could always look back and say, at least I tried. But now I'm like getting close to 50 and I'm saying, well, maybe let's push that to 60.
60.
Yeah.
60 is the new 50, man.
Yeah.
Well, sweet, man. Well, we're here. We're going to do a little debating. We have 3 new topics to go on. We'll do 10, 15 minutes on each one. Everybody get their shit in. We kind of limit Tom, though. So
yeah, gotta keep Tom on a leash.
We keep him on a short leash here. So, but if you guys are ready, man, we'll get into the first question.
Let's do it.
All right. First question of the evening. Is AEW an injury-prone company, or is that just the nature of professional wrestling?
I think it's easy. It's the nature of professional wrestling. I mean, all companies go through ups and downs where you see a bunch of guys get hurt at once. Look at WWE, Randy Orton, Cody Rhodes. There's a bunch of guys out there at once. AEW guys, I mean, I don't think it's fair to call them an injury-prone company. I think that's a mark that is just not fair. Wrestling is a sport where guys are putting their body on the line every single time they go out there. There's a chance you could get hurt. So,
yeah, I think AEW is definitely an injury-prone company, but every wrestling company is an injury-prone company.
Yeah.
I do think that their style lends itself to more injuries than a WWE, because WWE kind of has that performance center to wrangle everything into one style and make it as safe as it can be, where in AEW they're a little more open to letting the gamut of professional wrestling styles kind of clash and go together. And I think sometimes when you do that, there might be a little more hiccups there than a WWE style, but I think it's just par for the course for pro wrestling.
Yeah, and I feel the same way, man. I think that, they do get the stigma of being an injury-prone company, but they also have the styles clash that they do all the time, which to me is a lot more interesting. The box that WWE puts it in, and not saying that it's terrible, but I mean, when you put it in that box, it's the styles don't really clash there. You don't see a lot of styles clashing. So yeah, they are injury prone, but I think it's at the cost of, having the buffet of wrestling styles.
I think it's just a business. I agree with you guys. This is just where the business has gone. We've become almost desensitized in a way to some of the moves that were, obviously moves that we grew up with. I'm an 80s kid, so a DDT was like one of the most incredible moves I'd ever seen at the time. And now that's, a transition maneuver. People have grown to take more risks. They've grown to do more daredevil type spots. When Jeff Hardy was doing a Swanton Bomb in 99 and 2000, that was like, oh my goodness, like that guy can do that.
Yeah.
And now that by today's standards, it's tame, it's like a horror movie. Things that were considered game changing and frightening in early slasher flicks, just, you appreciate them for what they were at the time, but they don't hold up as well in today's environment. And to say they're an injury prone company, I mean, injuries, they happen. And sometimes it's not even because of any, I mean, like you brought up Cody being hurt. Cody, was he even hurt in the ring, or was that just working out? He tore his pec or something.
Right.
I had a match one time where I broke my ankle walking to the ring. because of the way the setup was done on the outside of the ring. I went to step up, and I guess the mats they had on the outside were uneven, and my left ankle rolled over as I'd stepped up with my right foot. You know, that's not necessarily the company, you know, it's the company's fault in a way that they set up the ring, but it's not because of the style of the company. So It's just, sometimes things just happen. And, you know, WWE does try to book their stuff in a manner that is more protective to keep the guys running at a longer, harder pace and the schedule, you know, keep up with the schedule that they do run. But things will just happen, and you can be as cautious as you want. And, you know, sometimes you just fall off your bike.
Yeah.
I believe actually Cody partially tore it during a match, and then he continued to work out after he partially tore it and then ripped it off the bone.
And that, okay.
Why, like, if you know it was partially torn, I don't understand why he worked out knowing he could probably like tear it further. Like, I just don't understand what was told to him there. Like, I mean, I guess we'll never know unless they get to say, hey, Cody, like, what were you thinking? Did they tell you it was safe? But
well, that's the thing too. Sometimes you don't know. I mean, in any match, your basic bumps and bruises, you know, you deal with a lot of pain that normal people, you know, wrestlers are not normal people. You deal with a lot of pain that a normal person would consider debilitating, and you just kind of wake up in the morning and go to work. So a lot of times, like, I've had broken bones sometimes where I did not know they were broken until like 2 weeks after the fact, where I'm like, you know what, I don't feel this getting any better. There was one time I had a broken hand and I didn't think anything of it, and until it happened to be a holiday where I was getting together with my family, and I had a cousin who's a physical therapist, and I was like, yeah, can you just check this out a little bit? And she's like, oh, do you hear that clicking noise? I go, yeah. She goes, it's not supposed to do that. Oh, okay.
Now, and how, as far as like blaming a company, you know, like when we see a wave of injuries in a WWE, or we see a wave of injuries in AEW, I kind of find it unfair that you blame the company. Like, anyone would blame. You hear a lot of people on the internet blaming companies. Oh, they're injury prone. Now, like in the world of mixed martial arts, when you blame a gym, like a certain gym where fighters are getting injured a lot, I understand that, because then you can look to their training practices. They're running them too hard. They're pushing them too hard. But with a company, it's not like they have these like 5-day-a-week training regimens. These guys fly into a city, they do their show, they fly home. Yeah, there might be some work on the day of the show, you know, getting in the ring, working through some things. But as far as like the grind of training, I feel like you can't put that on the company, because it really comes down to the two guys in the ring taking care of each other. And I don't see where there's fault that would fall on a company's shoulders, AEW or WWE. Now I could see maybe some, if you wanted to throw shade at the way they train at the PC, because I remember Bill DeMont kind of catching shit for being hard on people down there. But at the same time, it's still hard for me to blame a company.
Yeah. So I feel like, so I got a question to you guys would be, why does AEW get this thing? Because I feel like whenever you hear somebody talking about when an injury happens, it's, well, AEW is just an injury Why do they get that stigma?
Because they're that easy target right now. They're that company that's almost like, they're not a little engine that could. Obviously, you know, they're not this small company that's built, but they're on the map, but they're also got that little brother syndrome to WWE right now. So people want to put that stigma on them, even though it is unfair.
Yeah, and I think they probably get it too, because I think they push the limits a little more in certain ways. Like that, I don't think you're going to see a lights out Britt Baker Thunder Rosa match between Charlotte and Becky Lynch. Like, not to that level. Like, I feel like there is a little bit of like, they throw caution to the wind in a safety perspective, but I'm with you. I do think they're an easy target right now.
But they're also trying to present a more exciting style of wrestling than WWE, and that's honestly something they have to do. You don't want to be looked at as a carbon copy of the other company. Right now, we're in a two-company race for all intents and purposes. A lot of independents have been able to make hay. especially of late with all the tools that we have at our disposal with Fight.tv and Internet Wrestling TV, the fact that they are able to get this exposure. But when it comes to the big leagues, we're talking about two companies in the United States, and they have to differentiate their style somewhat. Otherwise, what's the point of watching one over the other?
Absolutely. I think you made a great point, because I think them trying to separate themselves from WWE, them having an edgier product, going for that more 18 to 49 demographic and not so much the young kids or the over 50 club. I think the byproduct of that is having an edgier product, taking more risks in the ring, trying to be more death defying. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
I mean, yeah, I grew up in the 80s as well. So when I turn into AEW and I could actually see a pile driver now, I'm like, hell yeah, this is what I'm here for. You don't see pile drivers in WWE anymore.
Yeah, you don't really see any Darby Allins over there just being as reckless as what they are too.
And there's a lot of fans on the internet, man. You posted a short to our YouTube, Tom, a couple weeks ago, and it was, I believe it was Daniel Garcia giving Bryan Danielson a pile driver, a sit-down pile driver.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing these comments roll in, and they're just like, so unsafe. I can't believe it. I love these armchair, I'm sitting at home with Cheeto dust on my fingertips, guys. Those guys are such technicians. They know what's safe and not safe. If that wasn't safe, Danielson would not have walked away from that move.
Especially with his history.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to go in there taking a move like that when he spent so much time trying to get back.
And it's a complete... it just shows you how much of a pro those guys are, that they trick these fans at home into, oh my God, that's so unsafe. It's like, dude, you just got worked. That was totally safe and you bought it.
Yeah, and now don't get me wrong. There are a lot of times you see something performed on TV and like I cringe.
Yeah.
You know, but that's part of the magic, right?
Yep.
If like we understand this is a work, but at the same time, if we don't want to suspend our disbelief, if we don't want to buy into what's being presented, then why are we even watching?
And honestly, let's be honest, it's a high risk sport. These guys are inches away from being paralyzed all the time, but that's why they're pros. That's why they're professional wrestlers. They learn this craft where they can make us buy in and make it look real. Yeah.
It kind of goes back to what we have talked about before with local bands opening for national acts.
Yeah.
And the difference that you can see when the local bands finish and the national acts go on, the professionalism and just how this show completely changes. When you watch a show like AEW Dynamite Front Row and you're seeing these guys go in there and I mean, it's a whole different ball game. And watching them.
Yeah, the last thing I kind of want to just comment on is this is a business too where, you know, when you look at the NFL and NBA, especially the NFL, because it's a full contact sport, a lot of injuries, a lot of like CTE stuff centered around that. There's that argument of people saying, well, that's why you get paid the big bucks. You're not being forced to do this. You're putting your body on the line to make the big dollars. Do you think wrestlers are compensated enough for some of these big risks they're taking? Some of, Adam Cole and Hangman right now are on the shelf with concussion protocol. Do you think they're making the money? We're not talking multi-million-dollar deals these guys are getting. Do you think it's worth it to take these risks?
I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? What is your body worth to you? What is it worth to live out your dream? I mean, you could say that about any job. Is it worth it to go and work in a factory every day?
Yeah.
The mental toll that takes on you, the repetitiveness, the tediousness. So you can really say that about any job. It's just that when it comes down to your ability to be able to live a sustained, healthy, and active lifestyle, as long as you wish to, that's when you have to start valuing things differently. But I think it's important to know that, as much as we talk about ratings and getting eyeballs now, in this environment, I've been in and around the pro wrestling business for about 21 years now. There has never been a time in that period where there have been more people being able to make a living off of professional wrestling. That hasn't been there since the territory days of the early 80s, you know, because even when you get to the mid 80s, things were already drying up. So the fact that you have these places to go and these eyeballs on you, the compensation has gotten significantly better, especially for the guys on the bottom of the totem pole. It's not just the 3 or 4 people at the top making the big bucks anymore. There are a lot of people making very healthy lifestyles, but at the end of the day, what kind of value you place on that, it all comes down to a personal decision.
And I think it's nice too, because I want everyone to make money. I'm all about the wrestlers, but it's also a business where I feel like a lot more people are in this for the love of the game, for the glory of it all, not just for the paycheck. Everyone wants to make money. Obviously, you want to pay your bills, but I feel like wrestling, for the most part, really is a breeding ground for people that are truly passionate about the trade itself.
I'll tell you a real story. When I was younger, I wanted to be a wrestler, but when I was growing up, there were not 5'7", 5'8" wrestlers there.
Yeah.
So when we were at Full Gear the other day and the cage comes down and Jungle Boy gets thrown into it, and I look at young Anthony and I'm like, damn, I always wanted to be thrown into a cage. And he looked at me like I was nuts, because that's the stuff I always wanted to do as a professional wrestler. I'm like, I would have loved for that. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, it's the truth. So
it's never too late, Tom.
It's never too late, man.
47.
It's never too late. I would almost cover your costs for going to school. That would be
Creative Pro's not that far from me, so
go sign up.
Do it.
Hey, if you're going to go anywhere, that's the spot to be, as long as you change your name to Max, it seems. If your name is Max and you come from Creative Pro, you seem pretty lined up right now.
Yeah, the odds are in your favor for sure.
Yeah.
All right, guys, are you guys ready to move on to our second topic?
Let's do it.
All right, second topic of the evening. All right, now, Joe, this is the topic that you brought to the table, so I'll defer to you first. Best or most influential celebrity usage in an angle or a match?
Oh, I see. This has been a big thing for me for years now. Because if you guys remember, the precursor to the WWE network was WWE 24/7 on demand or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
And they did those Legends Roundtable shows they used to do.
Love that show.
They were great. And one of them talked about celebrity usage in the business. And Jim Ross sat there and absolutely trashed Cyndi Lauper. And Roddy Piper, who became a massive megastar, bigger than probably he even ever thought possible, from kicking that woman in the head at the peak of her value, sat there quietly, didn't say a thing. Maybe it was the way it was edited or whatever, but that has always rubbed me the wrong way, because to me, Cyndi Lauper is one of the most important people of the rock and wrestling era, for the way she brought professional wrestling into the mainstream by showing up to the Grammys with Hulk Hogan, by showing up at WrestleMania in the corner of Wendy Richter, by basically being the bridge for that gap for the rock and wrestling connection. The fact that she's not in the Hall of Fame, and the fact that she doesn't really get her flowers and her kudos for everything she contributed to legitimizing pro wrestling during the 80s is criminal in my book.
Dude, when you sent me this question, I instantly said Cyndi Lauper, because without Cyndi Lauper, do we get WrestleMania? That whole storyline is what birthed WrestleMania.
She kicked it all off. She kicked it off.
How could you have any other answer? WrestleMania, the biggest spectacle in wrestling today, was because of her involvement. And I remember her, you were probably watching back then too. I remember the build up to her trying to get on Piper's Pit. It was a slow build. Lou Albano saying, she'll be here, Roddy. She'll be here next week. And she doesn't show up. She finally shows up. It goes to MSG with the gold record being broken over Lou Albano's head. Like it birthed wrestling as we know it today. So that's exactly where I went when you sent me this. So yeah, it has to be Cyndi Lauper, hands down. I don't think there's any competition.
I'll throw out some competition for you.
All right.
And it's just, I think there's a lot of things that people say kicked off the Attitude Era. You know, and there are many little road stops. You know, obviously the screw job, a lot of different things, but I think one of the key pit stops along really fully blowing it up into the mainstream was Mike Tyson.
Yep.
That Mike Tyson referee spot. I still remember Stone Cold Mike Tyson jawing in the middle of the ring. There's the bird, the middle finger, the shove, the pull apart.
Yep.
Austin's on the outside screaming. Vince is hanging over the ropes. You ruined it. You ruined it. I mean, that now I'm not Mike Tyson in AEW. Totally different story. Mike Tyson in this moment, that was Iron Mike. That was Kid Dynamite, the man. He was one of the biggest stars in the world at that moment. That's a very influential 90s celebrity moment for pro wrestling.
Absolutely. And at that point too, Tyson his star has dimmed somewhat from where he was at the peak of his powers, but he's still the top draw on pay-per-view at that point. People are tuning in by the millions to watch Tyson come back and punch somebody in the face and knock them out in 30 seconds. And having that moment, and like you said, Vince yelling, "You ruined it." JR doing Austin and Tyson.
Yeah.
Like for that 5 minutes, like, I mean, to me, that's where WCW lost the war, is right there.
For real. That's when you're like, holy shit, they can get tight. Because you're right. Tyson, this wasn't the Tyson pre-prison sentence. This was like kind of coming back, because let's be honest, I don't think WWE could have got the Tyson without the tarnish on it. He was just tarnished enough where he would do Monday Night Raw.
Well, they almost had him in the 80s.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Douglas had to take his place after knocking him out.
Yeah.
Man, so with this question, I wrestled with a few different ones. Cyndi Lauper was one that I knew. You know, I know the story behind it, and that was a little bit before when I remember. So, you know, knowing the story of it, and I knew, Tom, I figured that would be yours. I didn't have any question.
I knew it was Tom's. I knew it was Tom's.
And then, so the next one was going to be Tyson for me, because that was at the height of living through it and watching it and seeing how big and monumental it was, and still being able to look back on it. So I went a little bit different, and I picked a more modern one that I think had a lot of influence, and that was the Johnny Knoxville Sami Zayn match.
Dude, it was highly entertaining,
and because it transcended WWE and made, you know, headlines everywhere with the phone number and, you know, them going back and forth with each other. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not the biggest WWE fan. So what I was excited for WrestleMania was that match. It was an awesome fucking match too.
It was pure what Pat Patterson would call gaga. It was just that perfect WrestleMania gaga.
It was exactly what it should have been. You gave the people what they wanted. And sometimes, you know, you try to get too cute when you're writing out a match or scripting an angle where you try to surprise everyone or swerve. You know, we love the word swerve. But sometimes you just got to give the people what they want. And that was exactly what they wanted. It was the right time. It was the right people. Sami Zayn, what a pro he was to be able to pull that off with someone, you know, as limited as Johnny Knoxville in that realm. Obviously, he's stepping outside of his comfort zone to do this, but to put that all together and to hold it together, it was for what it was absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
With those three things that we just named have in common, they were all, like you said, Sneed, they all made meet the media, like major media with all of that. I remember like WrestleMania, it was on the front of the daily news of the newspapers every day. It was the headline on the news. Like you don't see wrestling like that. The same thing happened with Tyson. It was on ESPN. It was the headline on a lot of stories. Just happened at WWF. Like you wouldn't believe it. And it's so like honestly, like I could poo-poo it off, but it's actually a good point when you point it out and you break it down like that.
That's what they're there for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we're not wanting to watch some 5-star from we're wanting a moment that transcends into the mainstream and gets eyes on the sports entertainment that we all love. I mean, that's what they are there for.
You know, even like I'm not a Floyd Mayweather fan, and I could have taken or left his match with the Big Show at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
That's one instance where I'm like, I get it, because at that point too, he was such a draw on pay-per-view. I don't really know how it came off at the end of the day. Like, is there actual, you know, like what kind of proof do you have to show whether it was a success or not? But it didn't really have the staying power of some of these other moments did. I will say, like, even current day WWE, like you mentioned Johnny Knoxville, but you do have Bad Bunny and Logan Paul, and I think the way WWE has used these people into their angles and incorporated them into their stories and matches, and both those guys have committed completely and shown up and shown out at the same time.
Especially Logan Paul. I mean, he signed a 3-year he really committed. I think Bad Bunny, you know, one-offs, come and do it when he wants to. He's a big fan. Now, out of the more modern day celebrity usage, like you mentioned Logan Paul, Bad Bunny, throw Pat McAfee in there. Yeah, out of those 3 guys, who do you think has shown out the most? I have to say Logan Paul. I mean, that match with Roman, his Mania match was phenomenal, but man, that match with Roman was like next level shit. Really mind blowing that this kid's only, you know, just starting.
When you got to go in there and have a match at a big show, it's obviously a big deal, and there's an element of, can this person handle that? And you get put with someone like with Bad Bunny, they put him with a total pro like The Miz. He's going to guide you through this. Logan Paul, basically, when you're going up against Roman, you're up against the top guy in the business with no safety net. And to go out there and have the match that he did in that spot, not look foolish at all, look like he belonged the entire time, it's really incredible for where his experience level is. To do something like that is almost like ridiculous.
I pause because this is one of my favorite wrestlers I'm going to mention. I think the greatest person to ever transition outside of wrestling into wrestling is Kurt Angle. I don't think it's even like debatable. But Logan Paul, those first 2 matches, it was giving me Kurt Angle vibes of like the guy just took to it like a fish to water. Like it, you know, a lot of like Bad Bunny, even Pat McAfee, a lot of these guys, like they come in, they do great entertaining stuff. You love it, but it's those like transitional moves. There's the fluidity of the match is where you see their shortcomings. I don't see that with Logan Paul. It's like he gets the transitions and everything. It's so smooth.
Yeah, Logan Paul treats it as he's a wrestler who's also a celebrity, whereas some of the other guys are celebrities who are also doing wrestling. With McAfee, I think what McAfee has done has been great and very beneficial to the business, because you can't put a price on enthusiasm.
Yes.
And, like, I'm a big baseball guy, and one of my biggest complaints is John Smoltz. John Smoltz, Hall of Fame pitcher, broadcasting for the biggest games, the All-Star Game, the World Series, but he sounds like old man yelling at the cloud when he talks about the game. And if I'm sitting there watching the game and I have this man telling me about how much better things were 30 years ago, well, why am I watching now then? I should have watched 30 years ago. And when McAfee is jumping on the table and getting so into Shinsuke Nakamura's entrance, like, man, I want to be in that building doing exactly like I want to rock out like Pat McAfee to Shinsuke Nakamura's entrance. This looks fun. I want to be part of the fun.
My wife, she loves Pat McAfee. Like he keeps her entertained because she likes wrestling too. But like he just brings something for the casual fan because of his enthusiasm in what he does. I'll say we've come a long way with these celebrities wrestling since Lawrence Taylor, because these guys put on some good matches now compared to what LT did back in the day.
I think LT gets too much hate, man. I think that Bam Bam LT match wasn't as bad as some people say.
Yeah.
It probably shouldn't have been the main event.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
It was also a very weak year for the business, a very weak year for the company. Shawn and Diesel, was your top match, but it wasn't really the kind of box office draw at that point that it probably you wish it would have been, to where you could have put LT more toward the middle of the card and still had it be impactful without taking over your show. But that's just where the business was at the time. I'll tell you who I think gets criminally overlooked in this, especially when we talk about the newer celebrities, was Snooki. Snooki went out on WrestleMania, and as far as I'm concerned, that was a weak WrestleMania start to finish, but Snooki stole the show.
Yeah.
Now, what year was the Cindy Lauper? Was that 84?
Yeah.
84.
84, 85.
So before that, one thing that we haven't talked about was Lawler Kaufman.
Oh, man. And I'm wearing a Kaufman shirt.
Yeah.
And I totally forgot.
And
the thing with Kaufman, why it doesn't, it's very impactful, obviously, but it was still done in a regional promotion. It
wasn't on the national
scale until they had their dust up on David Letterman. But even then, a lot of people are probably watching that going, who's this hick fighting the guy from Taxi?
Yeah, that's true. It's very true. It was a territory thing, but props to Memphis, because
absolutely
for a territory to make a play like that talk about a big. And correct me if I'm wrong, Andy was the one that reached out to them to do that. He was a fan of the Memphis style of storytelling, so he reached out to Jerry to
actually he reached out to Vince Sr. Because he was based in New York. Vince had no interest in doing it whatsoever. Bill Apter reached out on behalf of Andy and said, maybe not in New York, but I know a guy in Memphis who may be into this.
That's awesome.
That's great.
That's great. Man, Vince Sr. missed the boat.
The way that they kept kayfabe with that too, because it was 10 years after his death was when they
finally came
out. Lawler said that they were great friends. Yeah. I just think that was a good one too. And before that, it was pretty much, that's kind of the first instance of any type of entertainment.
I mean, the biggest one before that is Muhammad Ali. And huge. He had his match with Inoki, and which was simulcast over at Shea Stadium during one of their big WWF live events. And he also went around the territories doing paid appearances like a special referee, and guys would, bump and feed for Ali, take the big right hand, and everyone goes down and yay. But even Ali at that point, I don't think a wrestler versus boxer match had the kind of, and Ali is one of the biggest names in sports history, right? We're not even talking boxing. We're talking all of sports, probably all of society for what he did.
Right.
He's so much bigger on a grander level than, but once again, it's one of those things where now we're getting, before my time even, it's hard to really appreciate without having been there. Plus, you don't have those nostalgic feelings of watching it in the moment and remembering how it made you feel at that moment.
It's a great point.
Yeah. Yep. Man, there's been a lot of good stuff over the history of wrestling, man.
Yeah. I mean, don't sleep on RoboCop and WCW.
Oh, I was going to say that would be one of my honorable mentions, because I watched that Capital Combat 1990 show got to be 1,000 times because of that. RoboCop ripping the door off the shark cage to save Sting from the Four Horsemen.
What's better?
Yeah. Your move, creep.
All right. Are you guys ready? We'll move on to the final topic.
Let's do it.
All right. Let's do it. Last topic of the evening. Should Matt Cardona go back to WWE?
Not yet. I think he's got to keep playing out this indie run while he's hot. And it's, you know, because it's one of the best indie runs we've ever seen. He's helped put GCW on the map. Like, he did that single-handedly. They had their own momentum going. He came in and he pushed them up to another level. He's gone to NWA. He's gone to so many places. Let this run continue. Let him continue to stay hot. And then maybe in a year or two, if it seems like it's starting to sizzle, then he could jump back over. And I do think eventually we will see him back there. I just don't think it's time yet.
I agree. I don't think it's time. If he does go back, he has to go back as Cardona. He cannot go back as Zack Ryder. I don't think that can ever happen again. I hope he sticks to the guns of Zack Ryder's dead. And he would have to go back on his own terms. I'll be honest with you. I don't want to see him go back to WWE. I think I want to see him continue on making, because he's done so well for himself, getting himself over on the independents, and on his own. I think he could continue to do that and make a bigger impact doing that.
I respect the fuck out of what Cardona's done. I think the fact that he's proving that you can make money, you can be a viable star, and you can reinvent yourself on the independents. I mean, the guy's holding, at one point he was holding titles at Impact, NWA, GCW, a host of independents. I don't want to see him go back as Zack Ryder. If that's on the board, don't do it. But as long as he can go with the persona he has created in the indies, and he can pull a Cody Rhodes type of move where the man we love right now shows up in WWE, I wouldn't be mad if he showed up on Raw on Monday. I wouldn't be mad if he came out at the Rumble, because this is a business, especially when you're getting in those death matches, man. I know he's safe. He's smart. He picks and chooses his positions, but this is a business where any false move, your career could be over. Go make the big fucking money, Matt. Go back, be the biggest star that you never had the chance to be when Vince was running the show. If Triple H is on board and Triple H sees what all of the fans see in what Cardona is doing right now, and man, imagine this. Cody takes the title off of Roman. Roman takes some time off, goes and does some movies. There's a void left. Imagine a heel Cardona coming into that company with Chelsea on his arm, taking on his best friend who's the champion, a Cardona-Cody feud for a world title. Sign me up.
Man, I can go back and forth on this because I see the appeal of Matt in WWE, but right now his indie run has been white hot to the point where I don't know if we've ever seen this kind of run from a guy who was known as a WWE talent for as long as he was. You know, he was with the company 15 years. And while he did have his moments, I don't think anybody considered him like this massive star. And to take that, knowing you're going to full well get the hate of the indie smart wrestling fan, and then turn it completely on its ear to where you have made yourself the most in-demand guy on the indies throughout the world. You know, he's doing tours in the UK, doing tours of Australia, getting booked literally everywhere, wrestling all types of people, deathmatch guys, technical guys, brand new greenhorns, you know, in some cases. Matt has done so much to prove his value. And with the way he works his heel character, I honestly, do I see the appeal of him going to WWE? Yes. But I don't know if his character lends itself to their style of programming.
Very true.
So even if he goes back as heel Matt Cardona, in a way, you're still going to be pasteurizing him to a point, because he cannot go and just, you know, tell little kids to F off anymore. You know, and that's like, it sounds like something silly to say, but he does it with such a vigor and such gusto that it's part of what's making this run is the believability he has when he is just portraying this absolute disdain for the wrestling fan.
Yeah. Outside of a cash in, I think you're 100% right on. It goes without saying, he goes back to WWE. He's going to lose something. He's not going to be the Cardona we want right now. No one with that amount of edge and heat to them can go into. That's why I would never want to see MJF in there. I mean, MJF could be great there. He could, but he wouldn't be the MJF we're seeing right now.
Not that we know now.
You would have to tamp him down a little bit. And I think it's the same with Cardona.
Now from a money perspective, I don't know, how much do you offer the guy? I mean, he's openly says every week on his podcast that he's doing pretty damn well, just working his own schedule, making his own schedule. And like I said before, when you work any job, what do you want? You would love to make your own schedule when you go to your 9 to 5 every day. And this guy basically punches his own ticket right now. He's doing well. He said, says it all the time, all about the money. He's got his merch. He's got his figures. How much of that would WWE want him to give up? Is that a deal breaker for him? So from the business side of things, I honestly have no idea what the answer is. Only he can answer that. But on a creative, what I'd like to see as a fan, I can't see the version we love of Matt right now really lending itself well to the WWE style of programming.
He says on his podcast, like you said, every week that he makes more than he ever did in WWE now. You're talking about a guy who's probably the most underrated mind in wrestling ever, because he got himself over without being on TV when he was Zack Ryder, to the fact that they were chanting his name when The Rock was in the ring at Madison Square Garden, and WWE never took advantage of that. So if he goes back there, he's only signing a contract if it's going to be lucrative and work out for him. He's not giving up the major pod. He's not giving up a lot of those side deals. So the only way we see him go back is if it benefits him somehow. And hopefully, if he does go back, he does get some say in the creative to continue what he's doing.
He's not going to get a say in creative like that. I mean, there might be sign-offs up front, but I don't think it's going to be like he's working hand in hand with Trips.
And it's also a very different fan base now. You're talking, the WWE fan base is not, they do not cater to the fans like us or the people listening to this show. The people who go to WWE shows are families, they're kids, they're a lot of casual fans. They like the spectacle. They like the big lights and the big arenas and WrestleMania. And yes, Matt is a star. I will stand by that for as long as I need to. But does the character Matt Cardona translate to that fan base in a way that it does to the indie smart wrestling fan?
I agree, but I'm with you, Tom. I don't think he goes back if it does anything to affect his current major pod, all of that stuff. But do the indies? Does Impact on Access TV? Does NWA on YouTube? Does that satisfy his childhood dream? His childhood. I know he had his little WrestleMania moment. He got the Intercontinental title. He stood up. He lost it the next night. But has he got that moment that he thinks he still has in him to wrestle on the greatest stage? I think a big part of Cardona, whether he goes on the major pod and says, I'm making enough money, I don't need, they're going to have to come with a bunch of zeros, blah, blah, blah. What he doesn't voice, or maybe he's voiced it and I've missed it. He wants that big, he wants the glory, man. We talked about the glory before. He wants the glory of being on that marquee at Mania. That's what he grew up a super fan.
And he says it. I want to be WWE champion. A lot of people don't say that. A lot of people are happy when you get into the business. You say, oh, I just want to have one match. Oh, I just want to wrestle a big name. Oh, I want to do a steel cage match. And you have these little goals. Matt says openly, I want to be the WWE champion. So I'm sure that plays into his thought process and things he has to consider, because look, we can say AEW is in the big leagues, and I do think they are, but they're not the top dog. And if you want to be the top guy, Matt was number 13. If you want to be number 1, it all starts and ends with WWE to this day.
Yeah. And well, I mean, generations of kids have grown up. That's where you go. You know, some kid throwing football out in his yard, he wants to be at the Super Bowl throwing the big touchdown pass. Or a guy wrestling his wrestling buddy in his bedroom, he wants to be the main event on WrestleMania. You know, like that. AEW doesn't have the history to even claim that throne. Now, I think they could possibly have one of the greatest wrestlers because they do have a big stage, but I liken them to the Challenger brand. They're Pepsi, but they'll never be Coke. You know, like they're Burger King, but they'll never be McDonald's.
You know, that's not to say they can't grow and they can't get bigger and they can't carve out a bigger piece of the pie. Of course they can. And right now, what we're seeing in the wrestling business is there's a lot of pie to go around, you know, for the indies included. So maybe we don't give those other companies enough credit for how big their reach actually is. But you're right. WWE is the brand. They are the Xerox, the Band-Aid of when you think professional wrestling, you think WWE. Yep. You know, for a long time, they were the only dog. An entire generation of fans grew up only knowing WWE. Yeah. You know, during the Attitude Era, we had 3 pay-per-views a month. Like, think about that now where we really don't have any. You know, AEW gives us what? The 1 a quarter. WWE just has their premium live events. But there was a time in this business where we, as fans, were supporting 3 pay-per-views a month. Between ECW, WCW, WWE, not even counting these fly-by-night, one-and-done World Wrestling All-Stars that would come in, Legends of Wrestling that would come in, any of these weird pay-per-views that were just trying to capitalize on the notoriety and success of pro wrestling at the time that we were still buying.
Yeah.
All those. You know, so when you think about that and you think that right now, there's an entire generation that only knows WWE or only grew up with WWE. A lot of young kids who grew up wanting to be wrestlers because Shelton Benjamin in the Ruthless Aggression era happened to catch them and grab them and make them want to do this. Yeah, WWE is still the place to be.
The last thing I'll say on this, it's hard for me to make this call and this decision because I want Matt to keep doing what he's doing. I think it's admirable that he's putting steam behind companies like GCW, even NWA. When Cardona came in there, it was like a fucking lifeline, man. I love NWA, but they needed Cardona in there. And for him to go into Impact, like he's putting all of his fans, you know, from the pod, they're tuning into those companies. That's giving those companies some life. So I love that. And I want him to continue doing that. But on the other hand, I think what Cardona is doing is so great. I want to see it on a bigger stage, even like an AEW or a WWE. But my only concern is those bigger stages, I don't think will do what he's doing right now. So it's like, if he goes to the bigger stages, are we going to see what we're loving right now? I think that's a big question mark.
And if he does go to the bigger stages, does that hurt him if he goes back to the indies when it's over? Does that help or hurt?
I think it helps him. I mean, I don't think he's hurt at all. He shows back up at a GCW show after a 2-year run back in the Fed. They're going to fucking boo him out of the building and he's going to love it.
Yes,
and I think that's one thing we forget too. Like we're saying, should he go back to WWE? I mean, if he does have his run, you know, works out good, doesn't work out, he still has the indies after it's over.
That's very true.
It's crazy to think about when you think of the past 15 years of wrestling. Matt Cardona might be one of the most influential people in the business for what he did, really revolutionizing the way wrestlers use the internet to market themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, the only one that really comes close who did it before him, but ended up doing it on a smaller scale was Cabana. Colt Cabana was doing, you know, the podcast before most people knew what podcasts were. But people would come to indie shows, and I know because I saw it firsthand, they'd be like, oh, Colt Cabana's there. I listened to his podcast. I saw it with my own eyes. And that was, you know, we're going back into the mid-2000s, late aughts, into the early 2010s. you know, but the way Matt utilized YouTube and built an audience and built a following, had a million Twitter followers when that was a huge deal still, and Twitter was very much in the mainstream, and you know, it's still very much used, but it, you know, it doesn't hit the critical mass like it once did. Matt did all this stuff, and now he has this way of making everything he does seem like it's a must-see event. Everything Matt Cardona does feels important. I can tell you a lot of people weren't watching the NWA, but all of a sudden Matt pops up and it's like, oh my God, Matt Cardona's the NWA champion.
Yeah.
You know, he's for lack of a better term, maybe it's not the best comparison. He might be the modern day Terry Funk.
I mean, he's definitely he's the Funk for GCW in a lot of ways.
And he goes to these places and he puts them over, and he, you know, whether he, you know, you think about his GCW run, he's considered a top guy. He's lost an awful lot in GCW.
Yeah.
You know, he's been putting over guys everywhere he goes, and he doesn't lose any of his steam. And that is the mark of a real star.
He told that story a couple of weeks ago when he was over in the UK, and he was wrestling a guy who grew up idolizing him. And they planned out their match, and the guy was going to have Cardona in his submission move. And the match was supposed to continue from there, and Cardona was supposed to win. And Cardona didn't tell the guy he tapped out because of how much the guy idolized him. I got goosebumps listening to it, that he cared to give back to that kid that much. Like, it's like, wow, this guy gets it. He really is on another level to do that, because he said the guy looked and he couldn't believe that Matt tapped in the middle of the ring. Yeah,
because what's that? That doesn't hurt Matt at all, and that makes that kid.
Yeah, exactly.
And not only makes the kid, but it makes the company now that, okay, maybe Matt won't be back in the UK, at least, you know, for a few months or whatever it's going to be until he's brought back. But in the meantime, for that crowd who follows that company and follows those wrestlers, you know, maybe they went to school with that kid. Maybe they know him from the neighborhood. Maybe his first job was working at the local supermarket where they shop. They've grown up watching this kid, and now they just watch their guy
be Cardona.
International. You know, it's the territory system again, where you have the big, you know, name guy, the NWA champion would come through your town, and your guy would take him to a Broadway, whatever. And
right.
Oh my God, if he just had one more minute, he would be the world's champion.
Yeah. I think we can all agree that Cardona is going to continue to make money.
It's very interesting,
always.
Man. It's one of the more interesting stories going into the new year. I'm very excited to see what the future holds for Cardona.
And I saw that fake Royal Rumble thing that's going around where he's listed.
Yeah.
I mean, number one, whoever's booking that Royal Rumble did a pretty good job. I'm interested in it.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it if nothing else. But it really is a good question. I don't know if there's necessarily a wrong answer, and I don't necessarily know if there's a right answer. But if you're Matt, I think the one thing you do have to consider is, if you're going to make that jump, and if you do want to go back and have another shot at this, you want to do it before you lose any steam, and you want to go in as the top guy on the indie scene as you're walking in the door.
Definitely.
Agreed.
Like you said, there's story built in. Can you imagine him, like you said, with Cody? Cody's like, you followed me back here. First, you did my thing on the indies.
It's a great story. Yeah.
There's tons of stuff. The only thing I just hope he doesn't go in when there's not a spot. You know, he could go in. I just don't want him to be the Gargano and go in, and now he's relegated to some mid-card match that nobody really cares about. I want him to go in hot. Like, go in like a star, not a mid-carder.
Keep the momentum.
Definitely. All right, guys. I think that's going to wrap us up. Joe, let everybody know where they can find you on social media and all of your stuff.
Oh, I am at the Joe Shoes on literally everything. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. What's the new one? Hive. We're all running away from Twitter to go to Hive. I just joined Hive to make sure I lock down my name. No one follows me. You guys could be the first if you want to. YouTube.com/Joe Shoes for videos of me eating or sometimes playing with old He-Man toys that I happen to find out in the wild. Because I am a legitimate He-Man character. They named the character after me. So I'm canon in the Masters of the Universe. And the Car Jomez podcast every Thursday, wherever you get podcasts, just pop culture stuff. Like this week, we're talking about the Beastmaster and the Beastmaster Part 2.
I love Beastmaster, man. Don Coscarelli. Love it.
Good. We just watched Part 2 where he goes, he travels through a portal to go to Los Angeles, which is I had never seen before. Beastmaster 1 was a staple of my childhood. It was always like, it seemed like it was always at my uncle's house on VHS.
Yeah.
But Part 2 is wild, man. Like I miss those types of Saturday morning on TNT movie of the week.
Yeah, man. USA Up All Night type movies.
Exactly. So I'm anywhere you can find me, but at the Joe Shoes everywhere. And you can always see what I'm doing.
We had a blast having you on, man. We'll have to have you on again sometime.
Anytime. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome, man. Well, that is going to wrap us up for this edition of the Turnbuckle Debate. Make sure you guys are following us at theturnbuckletavern.com. You'll find everything under that one website. Tom, we got a couple of seconds. Get shit in.
Yo, G Fig Kid, Twitter and Instagram. Fig Night Tuesdays at 7 p.m. and sessions every Wednesday morning.
All right. Court is dismissed.